Hello, team, and welcome to another Atypical and Philosopher video with myself, John from MSP. This is a Ukraine war update news segment for the 24th of February 2023. So much to go through. Let's try and get on with it. There's a lot of content to go through in my extra video this afternoon as well, so I might have to split that into two. Usual opening gambit, and of course, all the caveats apply. Please take everything I say with a pinch of salt. There, check your sources, check me. Uh, don't say that this is. I don't say that this is gospel truth. Although this is a news segment, so these are the news items being reported out there. So there's less kind of elbow room for me to hopefully um, accidentally misinform you. But all the caveats apply. Um, Due to recent YouTube shenanigans, we go to one area that could well be propaganda. This is the Ukrainian release figures for Russian losses for the day before, and you know, inaccurate propaganda caveats apply. Russia don't really produce the same kind of statistics, but I find these useful and indicative. And in fact, they do indicate, as the day before, that there has been an uptick in activity over the last couple of days. Liquidated personnel almost at the 1,000 mark, which is quite phenomenal and unsustainable. Someone asked me what unsustainable means in terms of losses. I might have a chat about that later. 13 tanks, 6 APCs, 11 artillery systems, and 3 MLRS. That's fairly significant, 3 MLRS, and in fact, quite a bit of equipment, really, overall. 3 anti aircraft warfare systems. I find that significant because they are quite prized possessions. If you're talking about sort of S-300, maybe even S-400, depends, or books or whatever, they are the pieces of equipment that are keeping the Ukrainian Air Force at bay and keeping the airspace contested. So if any side really wants to win this war, they've got to take out those air defense systems and get a superiority in the air, I think. 4 drones, 9 fuel tanks or vehicles, and 1 piece of special equipment. So a fairly tough day for the Russians. Of course, that doesn't mean it wasn't tough for the Ukrainians as well. When you see high levels of liquidated personnel, there's every chance that that could be the equally challenging day for the Ukrainians. You think of meat grinders like Bakhmut, where both sides will undoubtedly be losing quite a bit. But when you're on the defensive, there's actually a higher chance that the offensive side are losing more troops than the defensive side. In fact, Ukraine, the latest podcast, did a bit of analysis on troop losses, and they were talking about how the casualty rates for the Ukrainians were something like 10 wounded to 1 dead, and they were talking about that same rate for the Russians being 3 or 2 to 1, and saying there's a huge difference there. Again, those are very difficult figures to make sure you've got accurate, but they were sort of fairly damning of the Russian ability to medically sort out their wounded, and that has led to a lot of deaths. That isn't the same case for the Ukrainians. Just here's another indication. So this is Oryx, Jacob Yanovsky doing work with Oryx there, compiling the visually confirmed losses. So for yesterday, which they usually do it in 2-day batches, but I think they did an extra one yesterday due to the fact that it's the anniversary of the war today. Um, and they had 29 visually confirmed losses for the Russians and 2 visually confirmed losses for the Ukrainians. That's a 15 to 1 ratio. Now, you could talk about selection bias, about, are we more likely to see video and photograph footage of Russian losses than Ukrainian losses, etc., etc., etc. However, 15 to 1 ratio is pretty substantial. So again, when you're looking at stats like this and wondering where these sit with regard to Ukrainian comparisons, that gives you at least some indication. Shashank Joshi in The Economist talks about how a lot of the mobilized troops have been, since the mobilization, have been frittered away on the front line, where they just sent over half or half of the 300,000 that they mobilized straight to the front as casualty replacements, rather than training them up, getting them ready for a large offensive. They've been sort of frittered away. And there's an interesting analysis in The Economist I might talk about later today. Um, Mariupol has been hit a number of times over the last few days, and the important point about that is it's out of HIMARS range, realistically. So there's a lot of talk about what's being used. Is it this Turkish MLRS? A lot more people are saying it's probably GLSDB, so ground launch small diameter bombs. These bombs are launched with, I think, HIMARS, and then they have these sort of wings come out and they can glide further, and they have up to 150-kilometer range. So Mariupol, this is war translated. Translating Alexei Arestovich, who on a daily basis gives his chat. He used to be the spokesperson for the Ukrainian government, but then has subsequently stepped back from that. The Russian military base in occupied Mariupol, HIMARS wouldn't be used too close to the front line and are out of range. The distance is 120 kilometers. That is the distance of Mariupol from a realistic range. I mean, it's not technically, but from where you would place HIMARS. And nevertheless, Ukraine was successful, and the Russian sources are speculating that Ukraine received a new type of rocket and used it here. And indeed, there is claims from the AFU can strike either 100 kilometers or 150 kilometers or a little more, said Danilov. Who is Danilov? Alexei Danilov is a Ukrainian politician who's been the secretary of the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine since the 3rd of October. So this is a huge admission. Such attacks will take place not only in Mariupol, but also in all cities that are temporarily under occupation. This will continue until the enemy leaves. So they are now saying they have equipment, they have ordnance that can go to more than 150 kilometers. Wow. Ukraine is getting new types of weapons and more of them, says this is back to Arestovich. Biden stated that the Allies had collected 700 tanks and over 1,000 APCs. This quantity will be enough to counterattack in 2 directions and to defend in the third one, which is bad news for Russia. So that's interesting. There's a little bit more detail about what plans they might have, which is 2 counterattacks and holding in one other place. So I can't imagine they'd attack directly in the east, sort of through Donetsk, but more likely to do attacks up north and attacks down south. So you could have 2 attacks there and holding the western front line. So just to give you some idea of what I'm talking about here, it's more likely that they are going. Well, it sounds like they're going to attack in 2 places. So it could be something like Svatova or Kremna, and it could be down to past Melitopol to the sea, or it could be down towards Mariupol to the sea and cutting off supply lines to the east. So one of those general 2 areas there. Oh goodness me, fingers! One of those 2 general areas there. So over to the northeast and down to the south, whilst holding along there, and that's what they have enough equipment for, as according at least to uh, Arestovich. As we move on, Southern Command, Mariupol no longer completely unreachable. So again, this is the Ukrainian Southern Command then stating this. So you've got all areas. You've got Arestovich, Danilov, and the army themselves. Humenyuk, the Southern Command spokesperson, has said on yesterday that the area of Russian-occupied Mariupol in Donetsk is no longer completely unreachable. And then we have just a little bit of weather. There is talk. I'm not going to go through this whole thread, but it's quite interesting talking about how there's been an anomalously warm winter, particularly in Western Europe, and this has. Let's talk about climate change and all sorts of stuff. Basically, expect a lot of mud and expect that mud sooner. So very soon. In fact, the weather looks like it's going to warm up this in the next coming days, and that could put a halt to Russian offensives. They were maybe rushing to get their offensives done before spring. Well, it turns out that the warm weather is going to potentially cause some problems there. And there's a lot of talk in this thread about the northern marsh areas between Belarus and, well, in parts of Belarus and basically northern Kiev here, northwestern Kiev. These will be extra sort of flooded, and that if Belarus or Russia had intentions on attacking from the northeast here, that would be particularly problematic. But I don't think they'd do that anyway. I don't think they've got the forces to do that. But anyway, weather could act as an extra defence there. Okay, let's go on to talk about military aid. The USA is discussing the possibility of supplying Ukraine with fifth generation fighter jets, in particular, as part of ensuring Ukraine's long term needs, says the US Deputy Secretary of State, Victoria Nuland. At the same time, details about possible delivery terms, specific aircraft models, and training of Ukrainian pilots are not clarified. This is an ongoing thing. There's a lot of pressure on the US to supply planes. In fact, Boris Johnson, former Prime Minister of the UK, has said the UK should provide a couple of Eurofighters. And this is the idea. Justin Bronk even said that he said Eurofighters are the wrong plane to provide. But if you're going to do it, the only way that makes sense is to just try and open up the rest of the allies to sending jets in the same way the UK did that with Challenger 2 tanks, giving 14 Challenger 2, and everyone went, oh, okay, we can give the Leopards, Abrams, Leopards, Abrams, yeah, okay. And it kind of opened that up. So Boris Johnson's possibly saying that not because a couple of Eurofighters would be at all useful, because I don't think they would be. It would just be too difficult to maintain them. But it'd be a way of saying, right, now other people give Eurofighters. Let's get the supply routes going for that, and preferably jets that are more suited, such as Sweden's Gripen. So anyway, jets could be on the way, but again, how long is that a long-term thing after the war? So that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to see jets in the next 6 months, even a year. But we shall see. Sweden will present a new military aid package to Ukraine, which includes tanks and air defense systems, writes the Expressen. Sweden operates a Stridsvagn 122, which is comparable with the German Leopard 2A5. So that's a couple of versions back of the Leopard 2. They're on 2A7 at the moment. Obviously, good tank. Sweden has 120, of which 42 are in active service. So there's a lot of elbow room there for Sweden to provide a whole bunch of tanks. You think if only 42 of them are operable, what are you doing with the other 80? Like, are they just sitting around gathering dust? Do you have plans for them to sell them on? Why haven't you sold them on already? Are they just going to be cannibalized for spares? Yeah, give them all. Leopards en route. Poland said that 14 of its Leopard 2A4s would cross the border in a few days. So the 2A4s are the general Leopards being given. These Swedish were being compared to 2A5s. So that's a step up from the 2A4s. Some 2A6s are being given, I believe, as well. But yeah, so next few days, I would worry. I mean, if I was Russia, I'd be trying to hit those Leopards being delivered as they're being delivered. I don't know. They clearly don't have that kind of capability. Otherwise, we would have seen that previously. But that would be a worry for delivering those tanks. I'm open to send more Challenger 2 tanks to Ukraine if that's the right thing to do, says Ben Wallace. Ben, he's the UK Defence Minister. Ben is really based here. That's internet parlance for awesome, because you can see by the way he looks and the way he chooses his words that these tanks will come. I'm sure. Yep, who knows when? But I've long said that we've got 79 tanks basically not being upgraded to the Challenger 3. So what we do with them? Might as well send them all. And then we see in the UK more footage of Ukrainian soldiers, tankers being trained on the FV430 APC. I think, well, whether that's the Bulldog variant, the AS90 self-propelled gun, and that's a sort of 1990s self-propelled howitzer that is pretty capable, perfectly capable, and Challenger 2 main battle tank, which is a decent tank. So yeah, lots of training going on there. That's good. U.S. Army Secretary Abrams tanks may not reach Ukraine this year. There's still this talk about whether they're going to be building them or sending them from current stocks. But the ones from current stocks will have depleted uranium armor, and they don't really want the Russians to get hold of that. Abrams tank in the United States pledged to Ukraine may not even arrive until next year. U.S. Army Secretary Christine Wormuth told reporters yesterday. The White House confirms the allocation of a new $2 billion military aid package to Kyiv, says Jake Sullivan, National Security Advisor to the President of the US. Poland will send a Belarusian military attaché in response to the diplomatic issues with the Belarusian authorities. So that's all kind of getting more of a worry on the border there. NATO countries have exhausted their reserves of artillery shells for delivery to Ukraine, says NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg. This is definitely a worry. Currently, the conflict in Ukraine has entered the phase of logistical confrontation to exhaustion, he adds. That is a very explicit, an explicit admission that ammunition is a huge problem. Supplying Ukraine with enough ammunition is a huge problem. However, this is likewise a problem for Russia, and I was going to discuss a whole thread that Rebar's done on the ammunition shortage for Russia. So you've got Prigozhin, you've got the Vostok Battalion, and Khodorkovsky. You've got loads of people throughout the sort of military blogger community, and even Rebar saying there are huge ammunition problems for the Russians. So this is basically both sides have got massive ammunition problems. The question is, which side is more likely to be able to deal with that problem effectively? So you've got the united might of the NATO nations and the allies, and you've got Russia alone under sanctions. So going forward, I think that problem is more likely to be solved by Ukraine and her allies than Russia, unless China gets involved. G7 steps up Ukraine support to 39 billion in 2023. These funds will give Ukraine certainty and allow the authorities to continue providing essential services, according to a statement published by the Japanese Finance Ministry. Now, this aid will also help to carry out critical repairs to infrastructure damaged by Russian attacks and stabilize the country's economy, reads a statement. I don't know. I need to look into this. I don't know whether this is stuff that is given unilaterally, and this is someone just adding up all of the G7 countries, a group of seven most richest countries in the world, or whether that is separate from those other donations and other aid. So I don't know. I don't know if this is double counting, but it probably is. Australia is preparing a $33 million military aid package for Ukraine. It will include drones for the armed forces, Australian Defence Minister Richard Marles has reported to the ABC. Now, this is on the back of also Der Spiegel reporting that China may provide Russia with drones. According to information obtained by the German news outlet Der Spiegel, Russia's military is discussing the mass production of kamikaze drones for Russia with Chinese drone manufacturers. Chinese drone manufacturer Zhan Bingo Intelligent Aviation Technology has reportedly agreed to produce and test 100 ZT-180 prototype drones before delivering them to Russia by April 2023. And that is exactly what Ukraine don't want. China getting involved, and not that is pushing the limits with non-lethal weaponry or non-lethal equipment, sorry, because these are, they're just drones, yeah, but they can be used to attach improvised explosive devices to and used as weapons. So are these drones or are these weapons? NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg again said that on July the 20th, I think this is bad English here, that on July the 11th to 12th, Sweden and Finland will become full members of NATO. I think actually what he says, well, you can see here, he said, I see progress. My goal is for Finland and Sweden to become full members of NATO before the bloc summit. So the bloc summit is, I assume, July the 11th to 12th. And he's saying the goal is for Finland and Sweden to become full members by then. It doesn't say that they will on those dates become full members. So anyway, that they are really trying to rush that one through. It's going to depend a lot on Turkey and Turkey with Sweden. So the whole Quran book burning, the relations have deteriorated, and Turkey has said that Finland, basically, it looks like Finland could join, and Sweden might be a little bit behind or not be able to without Turkey getting on board. So it might just be one of them. I talked about this yesterday, and well, not about the actual final vote, but about the notion, the fact that this vote was taking place. So the UN, this is why Kuleba was speaking to the UN, which is a foreign minister, Ukrainian's foreign minister. I talked about his speech in the extra video yesterday. The United Nations overwhelmingly voted in favor for Ukraine and its territorial integrity. Even some countries which usually tried to stay neutral voted in favor, while some 6 regimes hold on to Putin because it is their final lifeline before being raised. So says Tender. But this is, although it's not the most, I think there's 171 countries that vote, or was it 100? Was 141 countries, sorry, that voted in favor of Ukraine, and the highest in the UN so far has been, oh yeah, here it says at the bottom, 143, I think it's been the highest. So there's a couple that abstained that happened before, but that's still, apparently they're still really happy with that. And the countries, that voted against it: Belarus, North Korea, Eritrea, Mali, Russian Federation, obviously, Nicaragua, and Syria. So yeah, quite a bunch of friends that Russia has there, and then a whole bunch of places, particularly in Africa, some in South America, and a few in places like Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and we've got Laos and Pakistan abstaining, Uzbekistan, Vietnam. So a few in Asia, a few in South America, and a few in sort of Eurasia, Africa as well. So that happened yesterday. That's non-binding. So what this means is it puts pressure on um, Russia, but will anything happen? It just tells Russia that, do you know what, everyone still disagrees with what you're doing, and most of the world want your troops and your forces and your material out of Ukraine. This was pretty cool. Latvian delegate here. I mean, I don't speak Latvian, but apparently he told the Russian. So I think this is the OSCE meeting in Austria, and this has been quite controversial because the Russian delegation has gone there into the meeting. A lot of people are saying they shouldn't have, but then the Austrians are saying, well, actually, it's the rules. They've got to be there. But then Austrian far right has invited them to a ball as well, just cozying up to the Russians. It's like, really? Russians look who your friends are, the far right, and the far right, who are your friends? Russia. What is going on in some of these places? Anyway, Austria has got this kind of neutrality going on, but a lot of people in Austria are saying, come on, we really need to sort this out. Anyway, the Latvian guy here basically, I think, tells, well, Latvian delegate at the OSCE, so it's a security meeting in Europe, tells the Russian delegation to go and F themselves. This hurts the Russians' feelings and they get up and leave. No, actually, that's not what happens. I'll show you what happens.
Message to the Russian Federation, delegation sitting in this room, and I will quote the Ukrainian border guards. Русский военный корабль пошел нахуй.
Thank you. Thank you.
And as the translation comes in, a few people sort of smiling. And then what happens is not the Russians that stand up and go. It's actually everyone else. The Russians start speaking, and everyone stands up and leaves. So it's the Russians, as you can hear, that are speaking, and everyone else just like, yeah, nah, I'm not being part of this. I don't know how many of them left, but it looks like quite a substantial number of them just get up and go. And there you go. So that was pretty cool. A few more bits and pieces. Explosions in Iran. I know that this isn't necessary to do with Ukraine. However, when you've got air defense systems going off in Iran in certain places and then hits to something, you're wondering whether this is, well, it's almost certainly Israel again, but are they hitting another drone manufacturing, and will this affect another drone manufacturing facility, and will this affect Ukraine, as in will this hamper Russia's intentions of getting assistance from Iran? I don't know what was hit there, but stuff happening in Iran again, and there are more explosions going on later there, I think, in that video. But there you go. So lots of activity going on in Iran there. Fake Russian diplomats have been revealed in Australia, and they have been, one of them, I think, particularly has been taken out. Or actually, no, I may be confusing two stories here. So A highly active hive of Russian spies posing as diplomats operated in Australia for more than 18 months before it was dismantled as part of a sweeping and aggressive counter-espionage offensive by the Australian, basically, Secret Services. The Australian Intelligence Agency spent months tracking the Russian spy ring, which comprised purported embassy and consular staff and operatives during using other deep cover identities before the ASIO finally moved to force the ring's key players out of Australia, according to sources with knowledge of the operation. So this is good news. Sparring's aim was to recruit Australians with access to classified information and, according to one source with knowledge of the Russians' activity, use sophisticated technology to steal data and communicate without being intercepted. So that spy ring has been dismantled, and they've been basically kicked out of Australia over time. And on the same sort of theme, Security Service of Ukraine has neutralized an FSB agent, which who directed Russian missiles to hospitals in the southern regions of Ukraine. 6 Russian agents were detained during the whole operation. In addition, one of the attackers came to the positions of Ukrainian defenders under the pretext of delivering aid to the front, where he collected intelligence in favor of Russia. So it must be really difficult in Ukraine, where you have people who are sympathetic to Russia, who are ostensibly Ukrainian, and just trying to find out who they are, who is delivering information back to the Russians. This is happening a lot in occupied territories as well, as information is flowing to Ukrainian side, but also from within Ukraine to the Russian side, and trying to wheedle these agents out is quite a demanding task. Anyway, that's the news for today. Hope that is useful. Please like, subscribe, and share. I've got a frontline update to come, and then probably 2 extras. I have so much content. I've got leftover stuff from yesterday and more to talk about as well. So it's there if you want it. Look, I'm not forcing you to watch my stuff. So if you think, oh, there's too much content, that may be, but you don't have to watch it. But if you do enjoy it and like it, it'll be there for you. Anyway, look forward to that or not. Take care. Speak to you later.